Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Ramblings of Designer podcast. This is a weekly podcast where we talk about the latest in graphic design news from around the web. My name is Adam. I'm a designer from the San Francisco Bay Area. I specialize in visual, UI design with a little bit of illustration. I like to give companies character. And every week I'm joined by my co-host Terry. How's it going, Terry?
Hey, Adam, great, thanks. As Adam says, my name is Terry, and I'm a UX UI designer from the Bay Area, and I help bridge the gap between products and their end users.
All right, so Terry, we have a lot going on this episode. Fill us in.
Oh, yeah. Actually, we have another guest speaker. His name is Paul, and this is a very interesting story. I actually met Paul just through LinkedIn. He actually sent a message and stuff, and we started chatting, and really great tips he always brings out to our industry. And then just one day it's like, oh, let me just kind of check out his background, and I was just so impressed. Just military. He's been at his company for almost 17 years, and we just kept talking. And that's when I just asked him, hey, would you be interested? And he's all, yeah. So, I think making, number one, connections is a great thing. And number two, talking. I don't think we talk enough to people. I think people are really scared to make that connection or to make that first step. So definitely do not be afraid. And let me tell you a little bit more about Paul. Paul is very family oriented. He's a foodie, crazy dreamer. And then also too, I thought this was really, really awesome little tidbit about himself. His dad is actually a fellow designer. He graduated in the 1960s from Parsons. And get this, he ran his own studio for over 40 years. So basically,
Wow.
Paul grew up as a designer and stuff. So that's really awesome. So anyway, Paul, I'm going to let you introduce yourself a little bit more.
Sure. Sure. So, hello, and thank you for having me on. Again, the one thing I will say preface is that I was not in the military, so I don't want anybody to get the impression that I'm doing stolen valor. I just have family who was. But yeah, like you said, my dad is more of the artist in the family than I am. I think I balance out my mother, who is a bookkeeper, ledger person, numbers person. So I've got the right left balance. I've been in some way or shape or form in the creative services industry for over 20 years. Started out in publishing, and then I moved into more of the email side way back when Yahoo was a thing. And I just saw it morph into, the crazy world that it is today. And I think what I've seen versus other designers is that I've been able to foster my career and everything in one company. Through my 17-year career, everybody else seems to jump around. I've been able to go from, doing almost nothing really creative and just kind of being that worker on the assembly line to, being supported by my company and my management, to which I'm forever thankful, to get into UX and to get into that design side of things. So that's where I am today, and with the blessing of God, I'm actually there. I even, changed careers in my early to mid 40s. And when you hear things about, oh, you need to be young to do this business, what a bunch of hogwash that is. I changed my career when I'm 5 to 6 years away from 50. So don't tell me it can't be done, because it can. So that's
Oh, I love it. I
yeah.
love it.
Yeah.
You are on my same train to the same place.
Yeah, and the thing is, the ageism thing has got to die, because when you hear about diversity and inclusion, of which I'm all for, because you're not better if you surround yourself by people in the same ideological bubble, ethnic bubble. It doesn't serve you any purpose to grow. But if you're not part of a multi-generational team, your company is going to die a quick death, and it should. That's one thing that I advocate for is. I've been hearing a lot about, oh, you're older and you're not going to survive in tech. BS, man. I'm a better designer than I bet you some 20-year-old is, because I actually go to my parents and say, hey, does this make sense to you? It's like, if you can't design for a 74-year-old person who's tech averse and they don't get it, you shouldn't be designing it. or you should at least talk to somebody who's older, because everybody uses technology. And when my mother uses her iPad more than anything else, I just kind of gravitate towards that. I equate it to the whole, back when I was growing up in the 80s, they had these huge, and someone probably will remember this, is the big button phones that they had. They made them for people with disabilities. So I tried it with simplicity. I think that's why I love Tesla so much, and bugging my wife to try and get a Model 3 because of the damn simplicity. But that's who I am and what I'm all about.
Awesome.
Can we talk about your dad for a second?
Sure.
Because it must be, to go into the same career as your parents, and then, for me, I have a son, and he's only 6, but I'm trying to teach him like the design and drawing fundamentals, and he's like not having it. So was your dad like willing to like teach you things, or was he harder on you because he was teaching you as opposed to like if he was had to teach somebody else, or how was that relationship like? Did you end up working with your dad at his firm?
A little bit. Not my dad he's never one of those fathers that tries to force his thoughts, or he's not one of those I guess stereotypical sports dads that like, I was a great football player in high school, so my son or my daughter is going to be the same way. No. He fostered my creativity just by being supportive. I used to see, I can't draw or paint or illustrate like my father. My father's on a whole different level. I'm not even close to him, so I don't try to be. So when I was younger, I would draw a lot. I would definitely have comic books, and I was drawing superheroes left and right, and really good, and painting, and they would foster that if I wanted to go take art, and Dad would foster that, but he never tried to force it. But just recently, when I really kind of within 4 years, when I made the official switch to have designer in my role, he was proud of me. He's like, finally, he goes, you're part of the family business,
Yeah.
And I just said it was, I said it was divine destiny that I needed to get to at this point, because I wasn't ready for it 15 years ago. Dad's always been supportive of me. And I think he and I have a bond with creativity, because if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be as interested in design and art and just technology if it wasn't for him. My mom's not the technologist. Dad was. He loved gadgets. So, ever since I was 5 when Star Wars came out and he took me to see it, that's been literally part of my life, with creativity and just artistry, and watching my father, bring home paintings and everything else. It's just been absorbed into me. And then eventually it stuck, and now I'm here.
It's interesting how if you hear about the creative field, or getting into movies and stuff, the Star Wars is a common factor for that generation, where they've seen it, and because of that they get into movies, they get into design, so that's awesome. Yeah.
I think Star Wars, the IP, even though we can go on a whole tangent about how, to me, Disney has practically destroyed it with the exception of the Mandalorian. The originality of it, yeah, trust me, don't
What
get
about
me
the Clone Wars?
Oh God, don't get me on that rant. Kathleen Kennedy should be fired. It's just, I was like, it's just, to me back then, it was something you'd never seen before. Yeah, you had 2001: A Space Odyssey, but I think it was the originality, and even though it was based off Edgar Rice Burroughs and all these different George Lucas had such a mind to, and the geniuses that he brought with him, visually, was just creating something no generation had ever seen. I mean, there were sci-fi movies, and you had the serials and stuff, but what he did is he took it and made a Lord of the Rings for space. I don't know how you did that. You literally took Star Trek and pushed Lord of the Rings fantasy into the same thing, and nobody had seen that. And that's why it inspired so many, because it was so original and the characters were so great. So it was just awesome. It's awesome. And I would completely agree with you. And I think, maybe the Marvel movies are doing that for kids these days. Who knows? But I know that Star Wars was a huge impact on our industry. That's for sure.
Well, also too, like people kind of talk down about Lucas these days, but I mean, if you think about what he started, right? He started Lucasfilms, he started ILM. He's like he started the audio thing, THX. Yeah, it's like he was the father of like all these things. Like he innovated the movie.
the movie industry owes its life to George Lucas. They
Yeah.
absolutely, and Steven Spielberg. They owe it to those two men.
Yeah.
Granted, Martin Scorsese, great director and stuff, but it would just be unseen little things. If it wasn't for Lucas and it wasn't for Spielberg, these movies wouldn't be anything. So.
So okay, so talking about your dad was very supportive, which is great.
Yep.
Especially when you were decided to go into UX. Well, then what was it that like made you go in and decide, hey, UX is the thing to begin with?
Sure. So I think she was hired in 2010, 2011. The woman Jia Zhu, who actually is now a partner in a design firm in New York. She and I still talk to each other every once in a while. She was brought on as a UX designer. Now, I had never heard the term, oddly enough, maybe because I was sheltered in the same company. And then she and I got to talking because we would work on some projects together where I was doing more of the content creation with HTML and CSS in a content management system through some of the designs she had. And it just kicked. It just sparked off. And I said, that's what I've been wanting to do all along. And then I partnered up with her and started learning stuff about it. And, where could I read some articles? Where should I go? It was more just evolving. And then she left to go to a different part of the company. And then she connected me in with the bigger design group, and it just took off from there. So it was a slow burn of a process, but man, what I learned was just it was unbelievable. It was the light bulb went off, like click. That's what you want to do, because I love technology, but I love to create solutions. There are people that are far better visual designers than me, but I just have a knack to know how to like information flow and architecture, and hey, that doesn't work, this works, and I love it. So that's how I got into it.
I kind of feel like UX kind of took us all by surprise, right? Where it's like, oh, that's a thing, and you can do it, and you can get paid for it, and then exploded. I know for me, like I was just barely getting into. Well, I was getting into design, and then as I was doing it, as I was just starting to learn design, UX was sort of ramping up, and then so when I finally felt like, oh, okay, I think I'm a competent designer now. Like everybody's a UXer now, and I was like, oh, okay, now I got to get onto this bandwagon. Like how do you, like how does that work?
Yeah, and it's going to change too. I mean, our titles will change: the product designer and then business designer. And someone's like, what title would you use now? And I just call ourselves solution chefs. There really is nothing. I mean, you can do so many different things in this, and I think UX is the new, cool term. Even though Don Norman coined it in the late '80s, early '90s, but in terms of popularity, companies are. I can't say for mine included, but there are some that are immature, and there's some that are mature in terms of their processes, and it's a messy world, and it's fun.
Wow, that's a lot. That's awesome though. That's awesome. So out of like all your experience when you started until now, what do you think is the hardest thing to learn about UX right now? Or basically, is there anything that is hard to learn, or maybe of an easy thing that's easy to learn?
Yeah. I would say there's a lot of, specific processes. Like if you go to the Nielsen Norman Group site, there's specific ways that you should do the UX. The problem is that what if you're in a company that is immature in their processes? It's going to be messy. So it's the adaptability. Like the one thing I know is that UX is done differently everywhere from the people I talk to. So yeah, that's great that a course is teaching you this. But what it's not, and that's the problem I have with some companies is that they'll teach you this, but then you go into the organization and realize that's not how they do it at all. They'll do it piecemeal, or they'll do it wrong. And yeah, it'll suffer. But my chief mentor, Justin, and I talk each week, and he said, just document it. He's like, just document it. He goes, you know what the design process is, but if they're doing it wrong, just document it to almost cover my butt. But I also say what a challenge it is to try and influence decision making by showing what processes you should have. That you should be doing research along with the designing, and you should be iterative and try not to, if you're going to do like a minimalist minimum viable product design, throwing it out there to test, then you shouldn't have 50 people on in the project. So it's messy. It's real messy, and I think part of our industry gets hung up too much on terminology, and that's what I love. But Joe Natoli, he's great. He's like, throw that stuff out the window. He goes, who cares what it's called? He's like, if you call it a drop down or you call it a selector tool, who cares? Does it do the same thing? And that's why I love the guy, because he's just practical. I kind of get sick of the whole, almost academic feel to it, that if you don't say the right thing or call it the right thing, somehow you're looked down upon. And I'm like, okay, is it, am I going to eat a pie, or is it just a cake that has a frosty middle? I don't know. It's like, who cares? It's tomato. You say tomato, I say tomato. Does it do the same darn thing as fill your belly? That's all I care about.
That's awesome.
I kind of feel like designers should be bilingual, in a sense, where
Yeah.
in order to talk with other designers, you need to have that design speak. But when you're designing to anybody else that's not a designer, like, you have to realize that they don't use these terms,
Oh.
and don't try to educate them on the terms. Just speak to them as they would be spoken, like with their language. And so when you talk to designers, you have your language. When you talk to the client or other stakeholders, you use their language, right? I kind of feel like that's the best way to communicate.
Yeah.
I like that, Adam. I like that. Bilingual. We should all be that.
That's
Bilingual.
awesome. Yep.
Yeah, I like that. And then kind of going back, how did you come up with your own design philosophy? Find it, build it, break it, fix it.
Just through the work I've done is sort of like find out what the problem is, design a solution around it, test it out so you can break it, because granted, your first design is going to stink. Maybe even your fourth design is going to stink, because more chefs will come into the kitchen and try to, throw more salt into the stew. And then you fix it afterwards. And that's the one thing. When I first started, I thought I had to be perfect every time out. And I suffered from intense stress and imposter syndrome. And Stephen Gates from Envision has become a friend of mine, and he even told me, he's like, dude, he goes, we all suffer from imposter syndrome. I don't care if you worked in this industry 20 years or you're just graduating from a program. He's like, imposter syndrome hits us all, because you'll see someone else's design and you'll know it's 10 times better, but what you don't realize is how long they took to get to that point. I know, like, I've been taking the UI challenge just to keep myself kind of up to date. I've done the first 50, and man, there are times when I'm looking back going, ugh, that thing looks terrible, but I can't beat myself up over it, because no one's perfect.
Wow, that's actually a really good segue into the next question.
Yeah.
So what would you tell yourself when you just started out, that by what you know now, but back then?
Fear is going to happen. Just be humble, relax, ask questions, reach out to people for help. And I would say avoid those that are just overly critical of you. Like, you can sense the ones who are professionally jealous or don't want to help you because they have jealousy. But for the most part, I would say, yeah, in my experience, I've only had one where I would say it was combative. Everybody else has been really, really helpful. And I would just say it's a team effort. You can't be expected to solve it by yourself. So the design community, especially if you build one within your own organization, for the most part, everybody's really helpful to each other. And if you get those few, I would say snobby artists that aren't willing to help you and look down on your work and stuff, walk away from them, because that's their own, self-consciousness. They don't have any constitution. So I've chosen to go with people that are above me, sideways, below me, and just blown away by their contributions to what I'm trying to build. They're more than willing to help. So don't go at it alone.
That's awesome. That's really, really great advice. And through your journey, do you have a favorite project?
I've had a few. The one that I worked on, and it wasn't used yet, but it was just recently, where there was a redesign of an existing experience that might or might not be coming, where they wanted a more animated prototype to kind of show it off. They provided, we were using an existing design system, so I really didn't have to try and figure it out, from the ground up. But what was cool is that I didn't want to use just Sketch, right? And some of the add-ons that they have, like Anima, is clunky. So we have Adobe. So I put it into Adobe XD and I started playing around with that. And I also put it in InVision Studio and I started playing around with that. Now, it was just cool because I was able to kind of learn new tools and look at interactions in a different way, whereas opposed to click here and this shows up. I was able to like create some actual interactions where I would show, click on this area and watch how it morphs and, it slides over and, the content slides all over the place and repositions itself for, mobile use. And I would say that was one of the most fun projects. And then there's been a couple. I can't just pick one. Finance to some is not sexy in terms of designing. You're not building for Apple or Facebook. But I would say of anything, I would say finance, doing anything for the financial industry is about as challenging of design as anything because of the regulation and the sheer amount of data that they require.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, definitely.
You can design and finance. I think you can cut it anywhere.
Oh, that's a nice statement.
Oh, thanks.
And then, just curious, you do have a marketing background as well.
Yep.
So do you think your marketing background has helped you in UX?
Yeah, it has. I would say it helps me. It helped me, especially with copywriting, with UX copy, and to know when I'm writing something to try not to be pushy, and to focus on the user as opposed to the sales goal. Where marketing is more about getting the money, getting the sales, promoting the product, which is all well and good, and it is a business need. I mean, you don't have any money come in, and it's not worth it. But to be able to change and put the brakes on to say, whoa, no, I can't do this because this is a dark pattern. Where I'm deceiving the user, and I can't do that. So, yeah, having the marketing background definitely helps, and it helps as well because the partners that I work with, a lot of them are still in those marketing roles. They may have changed the title to a customer experience, but it's still marketing in its heart. So I know how to talk to them and I know how to work with them.
That's awesome. And you mentioned about writing
Mm-hmm.
for design. Do you have any tips for maybe upcoming newbies who want to write copy?
Sure.
Or maybe they are designers and maybe they don't know how to write copy?
Sure. I would say keep it conversational, but don't keep it too conversational. It's not a text message. Spell properly, use punctuation, use proper punctuation, keep it short and pithy. If you have to write paragraphs, bold points of interest within the paragraph because everything has to be scannable, and try to keep it as short as possible. These users, they don't, according to the Nielsen F, or Jacob Nielsen's, the F view, where people view a web page in sort of an F formation. I think you have, what is it, like 4 seconds to catch their attention. So make sure the copy is readable and make sure it makes sense. If you put something on there saying like, fp.net, and I'm like, okay, that makes no sense. What is fp.net, right? So you want to have your copy to be as readable and as simple so that I would say even a 5-year-old can understand it.
That's great. Yeah. Well, sometimes a 5-year-old can understand and sometimes they might need a little bit more.
It's tough in finance because you get the legal people involved, which is, they're viable. They're trying to keep you from getting sued. So sometimes you can't do it. So don't beat yourself up if legal comes in and actually makes you add tons of paragraphs. Just put on your UX cap and say, well, could we put that all the way down at the bottom and, where at least we're covered, we're CYA, but it's not taking away the experience of the user.
Right. So, Adam, do you have any more questions? I just have one more.
I would say, what has kept you at the same company for 17 years, right? It seems like our industry is very, I would say kind of scatterbrained, right? People like to stay at a company for 2 to 3 years and then jump ship or hop around, see what else, go and try out different industries. But you, on the other hand, were like, nope, I'm planting my feet in the sand and I'm sticking to it.
Yeah, I would say life circumstances. The company is Prudential is a very solid, very solid company. They haven't talked any layoffs during this whole thing, and their cash they they're the rock. You know, they're stable. But also their culture is great in terms of, yeah, it's still corporate, and you know, people can thrive or not thrive in an environment like that. However, there's a real amount of, you know, in empowering those to better themselves. You know, it's not a hand-holding organization, which I respect. It's more of, you know, here are tools you could, if you want to better yourself and help the company out and, you know, help your career out, we're all for it. We'll all support you. You know, they were practicing diversity and inclusion before there were buzzwords. Like they you know, I'm in tech, and I worked for 10, 15 years for all women. So to try and sit there and say that, oh, there's not enough, BS, come to my company, there's a ton, right? They earned it. It's not like they were doing it to hire by a checkbox. Like the women that I've worked for in my life, amazing people, and smart, and helped with my career. In fact, I wouldn't be a UX designer if it wasn't for my former manager, and she's retiring. And you know, I'm sad about that. But if it wasn't for her, I wouldn't be where I am. You know, for her help. So it's Prudential's a solid company, and it just, you know, I didn't feel any need to leave. You know, I don't go chasing money, right? Granted, as a UX designer, you know, if I have 3+ years experience, I can go off and make, you know, 150, 200,000 in the city, but I don't want to commute 2 hours a day, you know, one way. It's not about that. It's about the culture. It's about, you know, where you feel most appreciated. And if I didn't feel appreciated, I wouldn't be there.
Yeah. You know, I was that I don't know if it's kids or what, but that sort of made me have my decision where I'm at now. Where I was like, you know, I want like a just like a good stable company that has good health insurance. You know, like
Yep.
there's a lot of great startups out here doing all these crazy things, but I was like,
Right.
you know, I kind of just need to settle down for a bit and maybe plant my feet, if you will, in in uh, in a stable company. So yeah, maybe I totally understand.
It goes back to almost Winston Churchill saying, like, if you're young and liberal, you don't have a heart. If you're old and conservative, you don't have a brain. And that's not a political thing. That's more of like the way you live your life. It had nothing to do with, you know, right or left politics and stuff. It's more of, you know, as we get older, we like some stability. And, you know, but that doesn't mean that we're against, you know, change or doing something new. But when we have more responsibilities, and, you know, wisdom comes with age, is that you see your priorities shift. And for me, it's not about chasing money, you know, and never was. I did that young, way young in my career before I even started Prudential. I left a job for solely for the raise, and guess what? Within a year, I wasn't there anymore. You know,
Oh
so
yeah, yeah.
I get that advice to young people: don't go chasing the money. You got to chase what is valuable to you. You know, if you're a workaholic and you don't mind working 80 hours a week, go work for Lucasfilm, right? Or go work for Apple, or do that. But it's not about that. It's about, we work for our lives. We don't live to work. We work to live. So fortunately, we what we do, we love, right? But you know, if we didn't have to work, would any of us really be working? We'd be doing something else. We'd keep ourselves busy. But that's the truth of the situation. But you know, I love working for Prudential because the culture is great and they take care of their employees.
That's awesome.
Hmm.
So, actually, you kind of beat me to my last question, which you
Oh,
gave one tip. So, is there
yeah.
any other tips you would give future UXers or UIs?
Yeah. Don't look at older workers as somehow a hindrance to success. Um, you, the ageism needs to die, because guess what? Snap. I want everybody who's listening to this, who's young, snap your fingers. Congratulations, you're 45 now. Okay, that's how quickly it goes. And
Yep.
you know, be someone young with the target on your, putting the target on your back, and you will see that you know, it's going to get harder. As you know, 20 years from now, when I'm ready to retire, I weep for the younger generation, because the AI, who knows what it's going to do, right? So I would say, you know, just knock it off when you say, "Oh, those old people, those old people, those old people." Stop it, because if you're saying old people and yet you say I'm for diversity and inclusion, no, you're not. You're a hypocrite. So I would say do that, and maybe just one other tip: be humble. You know, never boast, because I guarantee you, life's going to come by and chop your legs off at some point. You're going to be humbled whether you like it or not.
You guys heard it here first. Paul's 2 major tips. That's awesome.
For me, I kind of like when I see a lot of older people at the company I work for, because then that's like, okay, well, I feel like I have a longevity here, right? I'm like, okay, I could probably stick around because I mean, these people are
Yep.
well and they're like up there, and I'm like, oh, if they can have careers at that age, then I would love to stay at this company. That I know I could be here for the long haul.
Yeah,
Right?
as long as your brain works, who cares if you got white hair or not?
Yeah,
I mean,
I have.
it's so funny. Look at Don Norman and look at Jacob Nielsen. These men are in their 70s, and people revere them in our industry. But yet,
Mhm.
somehow, someone in their 40s and 50s who may not be at their level is seen as less. That's garbage. Again, don't espouse diversity and inclusion to me if you're not hiring somebody in their 50s because they're in their 50s. Get away from me with that. That's evil and it's wrong.
Yeah, and and that can be as the same term as maybe somebody who may not have experience, right? How can they get started if they don't have any experience? Sometimes they don't give them that chance as well too. So there's a
Exactly.
lot of different stories with
Yep.
that,
Completely agree.
right?
It's you got to love it. Oh, we want somebody with 5+ years experience. Okay, but somebody's really willing to learn, so let them learn. You know,
Exactly. Give them a chance
Give 'em a chance.
because
You don't
sorry.
have to keep on payroll if they don't work out.
Yeah.
It's an it's an at-will employment world. Not saying you should be harsh like that, but give people a chance. When you give somebody a chance at a job, whether they're older or younger, and they don't have exactly no experience, I guarantee you they will perform better than anybody because they know what they've been given. Most time, there will be some that will take advantage of it, but let's say I was laid off and looking for work, and someone gave me a chance. Man, I'd break my back for that company because they gave me a chance.
Yeah, that is. I think we're going to end on that because that's a very strong and positive statement. And then I think most companies and more leaders in our design really needs to foster that thinking a lot.
Yeah, they need to step it up.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. So Adam, do you have any more questions?
Nope, that's it for me.
All right. So Adam, where can we find you on the internet?
Find me on Twitter at Adanzepeda, that's ADANZEPEDA, and find me on Instagram at adanze.designs. What about you, Terry? Where can we find you?
You can actually find me on Twitter. My handle name is Foxen Inc. FLAXENINK. And then you can find me on Instagram, which is flaxenink.designs, and TikTok is just flaxenink. So, Paul, after this podcast,
Mm-hmm.
people are dying to know more about you. Tips, tricks, anything maybe about your dad. A, where can they find you? And B, is there anything else you would like to share? Maybe a project or if you don't have anything, that is A-okay as well.
Well, you can find me on LinkedIn primarily under Paul Manzione, Manzione, and you'll see that it's a UX designer at Prudential. That's primary, and then my portfolio is pmanzione.design, and I am on Behance. I'm not Behance. I'm sorry, Dribble. I just unfortunately do not have my linked right now. But if you connect with me on LinkedIn, it's on there. So that is my primary source. I can't get on the Twitter right now, and my Facebook's personal, so I don't know you yet, so I'm not adding you there.
That is okay. Anything else you would like to share?
Just you know, we're in a world that's changing and wants to change, and I just want to tell people who are listening who may be in positions of leadership is be careful to don't be quick to anger, as the Bible quickly says. Do not be careful to anger. Choose love, and in a world that is divided and broken right now, I would say what we need to do is learn to love each other. Because if we don't, people are going to get hurt on either side of the fence because of that. So I think peace and love is definitely something we need to start practicing instead of judgment and anger.
Yeah, and patience
Mhm.
too is a
Yeah,
big one.
yeah, absolutely,
Patience. Okay,
absolutely.
everybody. I think that's it for now, and we'll see you next week. So, aloha.
Bye.
Bye.